Welcome to the I Love Buffalo podcast. I'm your host, Josh Ketry. Today in the podcast, we have a special guest with us, Michael GAINER. He is the independent candidate for mayor in Buffalo, New York. We're going to ask him a few questions and get to know the candidate for the independent party here in Buffalo.
Right on.
Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself? And you founded Buffalo Reuse, is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. Yeah, back in, so I came to Buffalo. This is actually my 20th year anniversary here in Buffalo. So I moved here on November 1st, 2005. I moved here from Boston, but with the interest of just being closer to Erie, where my family was. I didn't know where I was going to move. It was either going to be Buffalo or Cleveland or Pittsburgh. I came here first and fell in love with the place. And here I am 20 years later. So, but very quickly got to work. I had originally intended to start an initiative that was going to be a training program for out-of-school young people. And actually did that the first summer that I was here. I recruited about 10 kids on my bicycle. We got some funding from the city of Buffalo, some funding from the Allegheny National Forest, and I took 10 kids to the woods of Pennsylvania to build hiking trails and bridges and things like that for the Forest Service. And that was how I started my experience here. But very quickly, the competition was for the competition came about because of the mayor's interest in tearing down 10,000 houses in 10 years. Then Mayor Byron Brown was running for his first term, and that was his vision as a strategy to improve neighborhoods. And I quickly started scribbling some numbers on a napkin and figured, you know what, there's got to be a better way. And that's basically how Buffalo Reuse started. So that became the next 2 or 3 years of my life. Over the last 15 years, I've also started the Foundry, which is an artisan incubator in the city of Buffalo. I've been running Reuse Action, which is our private for-profit company that does building recycling, building demolition, and we also own a construction company. And just have been investing, time, talent, and energy to trying to improve the east side of Buffalo. So
these reuse companies, Buffalo Reuse and Reuse Action, they're very similar, right? Basically, It's just one's like kind of a different version. What exactly do they do? And what is their, I know that Pearl Street's worked with you in the past and Riverworks, getting some supplies from you, basically. So the mayor had this idea to tear down all these houses, and you basically stepped in and said, hey, we're going to keep some of these materials and resell them?
Yeah, I mean, that was basically it. Yeah, the strategy, conventional strategy, what we do with vacant housing right now is that it gets crunched up and it put in a landfill. And the Buffalo Reuse strategy was, basically to offer an alternative. So we actually started innovating a different technique called deconstruction, which is whole building dismantlement. Wow. So we actually became demolition contractors. We worked with a consultant out of Bellingham, Washington, and we started large-scale dismantlement of buildings. And then that homes evolved into barns, and barns into warehouses and manufacturing facilities into, all kinds of different applications of removing gym floors from school gymnasiums. We do wholesale removals of houses that are getting rehabbed. And through that process, because it's intentional, focused process on saving materials, we're able to reclaim materials that otherwise would have ended up in a landfill. And then we sell those materials at a low cost at our store on the east side of Buffalo.
Cool. So, where exactly is your store right now?
Right now, the store is at 980 Northampton Street. So it's on the east side, just east of the Science Museum, right by the Nabisco Milk Bone plant.
Awesome.
So it's a three-story building. Our store is on the first floor, and then we operate a business incubator called The Guild at 980, which has about 55 different businesses. We call it affordable spaces for creative people. We've got designers, photographers, makers of all kinds, and they get 24/7 access to the spaces, electric, gas, big internet cable, and then a space of 150 up to 1,000 square feet, whatever they need for their business.
Oh, so this is almost like a collective or a group of people. It's mostly skilled workers. You're saying like things like carpenters and plumbers.
Yeah, it's got some skilled workers. We've had furniture makers. We've had glass makers. We have we have a stained glass artist there. But it's also a whole community of designers and photographers and people that do a lot electronics, and a lot of visual artists have studios there. So just a whole motley crew of different different creative folks here in the city.
Awesome. What was the name of that again?
That's
sorry.
called the Guild at 980.
The Guild at 980.
Yep.
Really
It's a
cool.
project that evolved out of our work at the Foundry. And when we started the Foundry in 2012, just down the street, that was almost the exact same intention, to kind of create a creative space for makers. So we had a beer brewer there. We had a woman that reupholstered fabric. We had someone that was making natural skincare products. We had a whole wood shop. And we subsidized, we all rented under one roof. And then it became this creative community. We started doing second Saturday events at the Foundry. We used to invite other vendors in. We had music, food. It was also just a big community building activity, just a way to give, for us to all get business support, creative support for the different initiatives that we're all running.
That's really cool, Michael. I like things like this where there's groups of people working together to make change. In fact, in my opinion, that's the only way to really make change. There's so much divide in our country right now. And actually, that's kind of the way you and I met. We met over the idea that our group labels are dividing us, and we need to have group labels that unite us, or just basically get rid of group labels. We'll dive into that in a little bit. Before we get there, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into politics to begin with?
For sure. So, for 20 years, I've been trying to do things, creative things in the neighborhood, trying to fill a void, or, trying to address a specific need in our neighborhood. So it started with vacant housing. It evolved into a training program for young adults that are out of school and out of work, because my commitment with Buffalo Reuse was to hire directly from the neighborhood. And we were having a hard time doing that. There were a lot of kids out of school, but they weren't ready for work. So I envisioned a whole program, and we piloted it with in collaboration with numerous different organizations, the Outsource Center that operated on Fillmore, Catholic Charities, a bunch of different organizations that were working with folks to do that. But that idea really never took off. I wrote a lot of grants. I did a lot of work to try to fund it, but the Department of Labor just didn't see the value. They didn't see the value like a lot of small businesses people do see the value. But anyway, we evolved into, that idea never got hold, but we still invested in our businesses. We did a lot of work in the community. We started the Foundry, all these natural evolutions. And then in the last few years, I got involved in this effort to restore Humboldt Parkway. There's been a lot of talk. There was a big effort by the Department of Transportation to build a tunnel, basically to cap the Kensington Expressway, a highway that was built in the 50s and 60s that really created irreparable harm for my community. It really devastated a lot of our commercial corridors and business districts by taking cars off of those streets. It concentrated car travel, so that had a lot of negative health impacts on the community. It's really loud. It's really just not a good thing for a lot of people in the community. So I joined a group called Eastside Parkways, and we really started to actively analyze the DOT's plan. We started to reach out to our local elected officials, and just consistently we're ramming up against a wall. We had this growing coalition of people that live in the neighborhood that were determined to see the highway removed, to improve their neighborhood health, to restore, this landscape treasure that was there, but that was devastated by the highway, to reconnect MLK and Delaware Park, and to do some really innovative things with how we grow and transform the east side of Buffalo. And every time we met with a politician, they were basically hanging their hat on work that had been done 10, 15 years ago and not able to think more creatively about how to best solve this problem. They were really locked in on this $1 billion expenditure and getting this done and getting it done quickly, regardless of what the implications would be for the long term of the city of Buffalo or for the health of that community. And for me, that was really the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, I've been trying to get things done. I've been trying to expand programs. We got a lot done in the last 20 years, but we did it in spite of government, in spite of the work of our elected officials, not because of it, not because they were helping us or supporting us, and we never asked for a lot, but just little things that help us get over the hump, to help us launch a new program that could help us have a greater impact, that could help us bring more money from the outside to start or launch a program, letter of support, anything. These things were all things that government just slam the door in our face of. And it was always frustrating to see that lack of vision and leadership. So when we were really pushing on the Kensington Expressway and seeing this just, blatant disrespect for, and disregard for the vision of the community, I knew that this was the point where I needed to take it to a different level personally. And I got involved because I just felt like, we needed voices of the community, voices from people that were doers, that were builders in the community involved in government. And I just see immense potential if we're able to leverage all of our, collective intelligence and energy and ideas to move this region forward. And that's when I decided about a year ago that I was going to throw my hat in and try to make an impact.
So far, your pathway in politics has not been super smooth, right? You tried to go in with the Democratic Party originally, right?
Yep. And I, New York is a funny state. It's
funny's a funny word.
It's an interesting state. It's it's many people think it's a solid blue state, Democratic leading, small D, Democrat, electorate, but the interesting thing is their voter, rules are really, they're really cumbersome, and they really prevent people that tend to be more moderate or tend to be more pragmatic or tend to be, that kind of self-identify as independent. They don't give them a lot of options. I came here from Massachusetts, where the largest voting bloc is unenrolled. 60% of the voters in the state of Massachusetts are unenrolled. They do not identify with a party. And I think it was always a very healthy relationship because there were checks and balances on the two-party system there, because you had this large electorate that at any point could vote either in a Republican primary or in a Democratic primary. So it really held each party accountable to people and to, trying to drive policies that were in the best interests of people. We don't have that here, particularly in Western New York, and particularly in Buffalo, it is an 80% Democrat leaning city. So, I joined the Democratic Party because I didn't really have an option otherwise to be involved, in politics and to have a voice and to be able to participate in choosing my elected officials. So I joined the Democratic Party. I ran and petitioned with the Democratic Party for mayor, and I was kicked off the ballot, basically for a paperwork error. And
what was the paperwork error?
Well, we're neophytes. We're new at the political process. So, there's a whole procedure, and it's very cumbersome petitioning.
Intentionally.
Intentionally. It's very intentional. And that
I don't think it's cumbersome. I think it's like pitfalls that they set up for you, right?
Exactly.
You can't say that. I'll say
you
that.
have to have a form that's filled out in exact same way with the exact right verbiage, and they have to be numbered 1 through whatever, how many numbers, and they have to be signed and they have to be witnessed and this and that. So, I was pretty much the only person petitioning, but my partner went out one day and got some petition signatures, but she didn't sign the witness statement. So she borrowed my van that day. It ended up in my van. I picked it up a few days later and said, "Oh, I never finished this page," and went out and finished it. And they figured it out. So they figured it out because a woman who in the petitioning process, you can't sign for someone else. But this woman signed for her husband because he's blind and she's his proxy. So she could legally sign for him, and she did. But because the signatures looked exactly the same, they called her and they're like, "Oh, yes, I signed for a very nice woman." Well, that just happened to be my partner, but I happened to be the one that signed the witness statement. So in the court of law, when a candidate makes a mistake on a petition, they throw out the whole thing. And they hold the candidate to a much higher standard than they hold volunteers to. So it was deliberated for several hours in state Supreme Court, and they ended up throwing out our whole ballot. Wow. But I will tell you that the Democratic Party spent significant resources to go through all 5,000 of our signatures. They categorized every signature. They went to people's homes. They made phone calls. I mean, they went to the ends of the earth to make sure that we weren't on the Democratic primary ballot. So when we petitioned as independents, we were a lot more the wise, because, when you get sued in state Supreme Court, they got to put all their cards on the table.
Yep.
And we learned a lot about in the games they play and the tricks that they, and what they're looking for and how they go after a candidate if they really want to contest their signatures. So when we petitioned as independents, they challenged every other candidate that was in it, submitted general objections. You have to do those within a few days of the petition ending. And then they submit specific objections, and they have to be delivered by a FedEx and this, but we got no specific objections because our petitions were really, really tight during the independent process. We had learned a lot. We were super diligent. And we got it done. So we are one of 3 candidates on the ballot. We created a ballot line called Restore Buffalo, kind of in honor of the Restore Humboldt Parkway effort. But, it's also about restoring integrity to the election process. And, I think it's about restoring a sense of urgency, a sense of community values, a sense of purpose to, our elected offices, and trying to get more people involved in the process. And that's really what our ballot line is all about.
Oh, that's great. You kind of touched on something there, a couple things. For one, like these politicians that were making the decisions and you were asking for their help for the Humboldt Parkway situation. It's really frustrating to me personally when people that don't have skin in the game are making decisions over the people that do have skin in the game,
right? People
in the neighborhoods.
Right.
And you talked a little bit in our previous conversations. I forgot the name that you gave to it, but it was like neighbors helping neighbors or neighborhoods, something like this.
So this is a whole... This is where we really, I think, came together at this mixer last Tuesday, which is it's a whole different approach to decision making and problem solving at the city level. It's called Neighbors Building Neighborhoods, and it really leans into and kind of embraces this philosophy that the people that live in those neighborhoods know what they need best, and they have infinite perspective and wisdom as to, what ideas will work best in their communities. So, we saw this during the restoration of the Humboldt Parkway effort. It was almost a 2-year effort where we were analyzing the DOT's data and their proposal and their analysis and their all of these things. And then we were doing our own education. We were reaching out directly to neighbors that lived on the Humboldt Parkway. And then the whole effort culminated in a lawsuit where we actually got 60 plaintiffs directly from the Humboldt Park neighborhood to join the lawsuit, to stay and stand up and say to the DOT, no, this isn't in our best interest. No, this isn't going to improve health outcomes. And no, this isn't what we want. We want something different. We want something that is really transformative for our communities, that brings back what was lost and that brings and restores health to each of our neighborhoods. And it really is the power of listening and trusting neighborhoods and empowering them with some decision-making authority and seeing what they're able to accomplish. And in full disclosure, I hijacked the name from the previous mayor of Rochester with his permission, Mayor Bill Johnson, who has been a really incredible mentor, who has shared with me, how they were able to implement Neighbors Building Neighborhoods and the impact that it had in Rochester almost 25 years ago.
This kind of mindset, Michael, is what attracts me to you as a candidate. There's a philosophy that I believe strongly in, and anybody that listens to this podcast knows I talk about collective intelligence, group problem solving, that groups are wise, especially if the groups have skin in the game. And there's all kinds of scientific studies on this. And this is something that's called power with versus power over. And if you have power over something, it comes from the top down. And that's what a lot of our systems are right now. And these centralized powers, they can be corrupted very easily when they don't include the communities that they affect with them. And you spoke a lot about listening to your communities and listening to your neighborhoods. And this is power with, which I am very strongly in favor for. No matter what the candidate label has on their name, anybody who talks in the idea of power with is my ally.
Right. So. Yeah. And I think that very much is how, we have been able to get the things done that we've gotten done over the last 20 years, is that, I've had obviously some very strong visions in terms of, the big ideas or the big direction, but I came here knowing nothing about this community. I came here as an outsider. So, I have energy and I have the capacity to make things happen, but that doesn't happen unless you're working in concert with the people that are here, that share those same values, that do believe in that work and are willing to work. There was a large community of people that had talked and discussed and considered doing deconstruction and salvage way before I got to Buffalo. And they tried it and it didn't work, and they tried it and they kept pushing. And I have a lot of pride in the fact that when we were able to come together, that we were able to overcome some of the many obstacles that had existed in the past, and we were able to be really effective and get things done. And I think that that's really, if you trust that process and you lean into that belief of, a collective intelligence, or, like with that video, that swarm intelligence that you shared with me, like that, that we are just, the sum of the parts is just so much greater. And I think that that's really where we've put our faith over these years, and why we've been able to move the mountains that we've moved.
There seems to be a movement in the world right now where people are kind of realizing they're over this left versus right thing, this centralized corrupt thing, and they want people to govern with them and include them in the process. And one of your stated priorities as a candidate was that you want to invest in young people to improve the neighborhoods.
Right.
And we're seeing a lot of these younger generations like Gen Z becoming very active in politics in the last decade, but not in the traditional ways that we are used to. Maybe you're in my generation. And these younger people are using technology to communicate. Like, I teach jujitsu, and I'm very impressed with how informed this younger generation is. But also around the world, I've seen some amazing movements of people that happen very fast using technology, and it's usually coming from Gen Z or younger generations. A couple examples were the Sunflower Revolution with Audrey Tang, and that happened in Taiwan. So the students set up, they want transparency. They want to know what's going on with their government. So they set up a digital way to kind of look into government and in real time relay that to the nation so that the rules weren't being taken advantage of, in this case, by the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP there. But even more recently, just a couple of weeks ago in Nepal, they overthrew their entire government using basically Discord and an anime meme. They use these memes to kind of symbolize that they were sick of the corruption, and that the younger generation came together and they elected their new leader on Discord, using Discord. Now, is this probably the best way? I don't know. But I do love the ability of the people to actually have a voice and a say in their governance and a say in who's really representing them. Right. It would seem that the younger generations, for this case, might be just primed for an independent candidate. I know that a lot of people that I talk to are just sick of it. And if your message can get through to them that, we're going to be focused on better systems, we're going to be focused on transparency. We're going to be focused on ways to govern with, not govern over, power with, not power over. I think these are messages that a lot of people will resonate with. Maybe could you explain some ways that you would like to reach the younger generations, the ones that seem to be the most fed up with the left versus right paradigm and the labels that are dividing us? How do you see yourself reaching this younger generation?
Well, I think that the way we're doing it is the way we're doing it now. The difference between, I've been involved, on the sidelines of politics, not personally as a candidate or anything, but I've done a lot supporting other candidates before I came to Buffalo. And, there was a lot of reliance during those days in the early 2000s and even in the 90s on traditional media sources. And, the benefit today, and there's, social media gets a lot of flack because, anybody can publish and, there's not fact checking always. But the greatest thing is that it really does give voice to so many people, and you're able to communicate ideas much more rapidly and much more efficiently than we've ever seen in modern modern human history. So that is what gives me hopefulness about this process. And I also think that, being an independent at this point in time, it's not just the Democrats. People are pissed off in general about all parties, because what the parties have done is they've divided us. They've pushed us further into our corners. And, I think getting kicked off the ballot was the greatest service that the Democratic Party could have done for me, because it really did liberate me from that label. And we've talked a little bit about this, Josh, about labels and how they're dividing. They're used as a tool to divide people. As soon as you self-identify as a socialist, as a conservative, as a business person or a developer, even, people immediately make these assumptions about what you're really about. And as soon as they make those assumptions, it's almost like a switch turns off, right? Like they're not as receptive to your ideas or the things that you're sharing, or the solution that you may have because of that label, because of their assumption, because of their bias, because of their own mental block with their past, their baggage with that label. And I think when we bring independent ideas and we really focus on solutions and we focus on problem solving and we focus on how to bring as many people to the table as possible, because when we bring those people, we bring ideas, we bring strength, we bring solutions, we bring energy, right? How many movements have we seen that started but squandered? Because they didn't have enough energy. They didn't have enough, the thrust. They didn't have a large consensus, and I think that that's where having being truly independent and being committed on a vision and on a purpose and on a direction is more powerful than focused on a party or a label. And that's really the focus and the hopefulness that I bring. And I hope one that I think speaks to young people as well.
I think it will. The young people that I see are very in tune to this kind of thing. And I talk about this a lot myself, that I challenge anyone to show me a time in history where there was tyranny without a group label first. So it's not just labels. Some labels that have merit, like, you are whatever, you're a corrupter, you corrupt systems. That's a merit-based label. I'm labeling you because of something that you've done. But when I say that, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, or these group labels that don't come with merit, these cause problems. And in the history of the world, all tyranny requires the others. And the others is a group label. And, you studying collective intelligence and group creativity and group problem solving, we are finding that tyranny goes in this order. It starts off with group labels. Group labels lead to echo chambers. Echo chambers leads to groupthink. And then groupthink leads to tyranny, in that order. So if you cut off the group labels and just say, hey, we're one people, we're one community, we're one neighborhood. Yeah, we have difference of opinions, but let's solve this problem one at a time. When you do this and you use things like collective intelligence systems, you can take very divisive topics and get answers. You're not going to get an answer that's in line with the Democrats or the Republicans. What you're going to get is answers that the people have high confidence scores that we should implement, that are unique and much different than these two political parties are offering, because the power isn't coming from the top down. It's coming from everyone behind it. And then on top of that, all of the people will kind of self-police these policies because they want to see them succeed because you gave them a voice. So all these things, I think that younger generation is definitely in tune to. I'm seeing them, asking for things like, why isn't there interactive data, and why isn't there dashboards the public can be constantly looking at, budget tracking on blockchain? Why isn't there real-time communication channels between the people that are running our government and their representative, or the representatives and the constituents? Why isn't there communication? Why isn't, when they write a bill, they ask the people like how they think about the bill, right? You're supposed to be representing the people, but what tools do we have to even communicate with our representatives? These tools don't exist. So my question for you would be, if you get into office, would you think it would be wise to use some government funds to make the ability for constituents to communicate with the representatives better and govern with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I am kind of old school when it comes to how I've organized people and how I've, done group decision making and problem solving in the past. But I am super inspired and curious about all of these new tools that are coming online that allow us to, basically bring together all these thoughts and ideas, and from that, use technology to analyze those ideas to kind of bring together some of the group think or consensus ideas that are, in that community or in that group. I also just think that having a more transparent government, one where it's more accessible to people, is a huge aspect of that. I tell people we're going to have a mayor's office in the community, likely on Jefferson Avenue, because it's really important to me. What's great is that the campaigning process, I've taken it very seriously. Like I have really embraced the opportunity to go out into every neighborhood and have conversations with people and meet them at their businesses or meet them at their block clubs or meet them at forums. And like here, I make it a point to respond to all the text messages and all the Facebook messages and all the TikTok messages, even the crazy ones that, from my perspective, that don't fit with my worldview, because I want to try to understand where people are coming from. I really have really embraced that opportunity to try to find shared understanding and shared commitment to that big picture. And try not to be distracted by the little things. And I love the promise and the prospect of how technology can help to do that better. And transparency is first and foremost on my list, because I feel like there are unnecessary burdens and obstacles that government has created for, for inviting more people to the table. And just like you said, it's really focused on consolidating and centralizing power. And I want to figure out what tools can we leverage to bring more decision making and more transparency and more access to people. And I know that when we're able to do that, we're capable of almost immeasurable positive outcomes for our community, because I see I'm talking to these people, and these are intelligent people that have careers in affordable housing or have careers in finance and have done these things, have lived these lives, and yet they, like me, feel like they're on the outside looking in. So we have this city of 250,000 people, many of them that have that spirit of Buffalo in their being, where they want to give back, they want to contribute, and there's not an access point for it. So, what would we be capable of as a city if we were able to tap into that intelligence, that experience, that wisdom, and utilize it and leverage it using tools that right now aren't being used to bring some of these new initiatives and new ideas to life? And that's what I'm very committed to investing in and exploring further, because I think that that's where, particularly in a city like Buffalo, where we have limited resources, we have to embrace every one of our strengths. And I think our people is one of the greatest.
People is the greatest. There's a philosopher named David Deutsch, and he talks about the power of knowledge in terms of the universe, epistemology, creating knowledge. And he just puts it in such a profound way, where he says that all problems that don't defy the laws of physics are solvable with the right knowledge. And the collective intelligence community has this saying that, humans solve problems better in high trust groups. Yeah. So we need to be able to build trust with each other, and we need systems that we trust. And right now we don't trust any systems. It's really hard for me to name a system that I trust. Systems of government, business, media, academia, food, science, they're all have lost the trust of the people.
Right.
And part of it comes back to what you said, is transparency. In my opinion, democracy does not exist anywhere without transparency.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to model and we're going to build trust through how we do business every day. And if we're modeling that, if we're modeling a system of collective decision making where we put our neighbors in the driver's seat of planning and problem solving, and we're authentically listening to them. And, just because we're listening doesn't mean that every neighborhood gets everything they want. That's not sustainable, right? And it's not feasible, particularly where we're at now. But what we have to do is be in a position where we understand what the needs of each community are, so that when we do have the resources and opportunity, we're out ahead of it. So many things. You just look at this Humboldt Parkway experience. Had they been out in front of this, the DOT's been talking about this project in this area for 17 years. but never did they really authentically engage with the neighbors. They engaged with one group, one small group of constituents, but then they basically extrapolated from that small group all of their assumptions and what they thought was best for the entire community. And that just did not work. And we saw it come to head during this process. So if you're able to engage people in an authentic, transparent way and bring those people to the table and figure out what those needs are, and then do a needs assessment citywide to identify the most profound needs, and then allocate resources strategically using data, using, the voices of those people, most people are pretty reasonable. Like when you sit down and you talk to people, and because I've done this, you say, I've absolutely done this. And I say, if I'm in a neighborhood and I'm like, well, I understand those needs, but let me tell you or share with you this other competing need. And you decide, if I've got $100 to spend, where would you rather that $100 be spent? And, most people, when they look through that lens, they're able to be objective about it and be like, wow, yeah, you're right. That is a more profound need. And that's something that we need to invest in. Almost universally, people acknowledge that the East Side has been left behind for decades, and that we need to be strategic, we need to be focused, we need to be resourceful, we got to be creative in how we address the needs of that community. And
you've been doing that.
Yeah.
And that's that on boots on the ground, doing it for a long time. And there's a lot to be commendable about that from where I sit anyways. That is a difficult problem to solve, but the way we solve it is together. And a lot of people think, when you get large groups of people together to solve problems, there's going to be all this conflict. Well, there's all these new systems that most people don't understand. And the truth of the matter is that most people are not greedy. This is testable. This is science. Most people, somewhere upwards of 95% of people, want to collaborate with their neighbors.
Right.
And knowing that scientific fact, when you start putting these systems together and doing it, you can run businesses, you can run possibly governments, no, definitely governments. America itself was decentralized for the time when it was created. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but it was also able to error correct, which not a lot of governments were. And over time, it was doing pretty good until the powers got centralized with the political parties and then corrupted. And now everywhere you talk, anybody you talk to, our systems are fully corrupted, and it's sad. And we need alternatives to this. And kind of thinking that we have here today with Michael, this is the kind of thinking that we should be talking about. Governing with getting the people together, having town hall meetings again, having communities meet up, talking about ways to problem solve together, and having things that are transparent. If we can't see the problem as people, we can't help solve it.
Right.
And so when that's hidden from us on purpose, and when these obstacles are put into place that distort the idea of democracy, this is the democratic process. Well, is it? Is it really the democratic process when there's 5,000 you need a team of lawyers to navigate something that should be pretty simple to do? It sounds like this is the new way to be appealing to the new generations. And people are looking for candidates like this, including myself, to be honest, including a lot of people that I know and a lot of people that I talk to. Everyone is looking for an alternative. So, Michael, I really don't have too many more questions for you today. I would like to close this out kind of maybe with one last question.
Sure.
Tell us maybe like what your goals would be when you get into office. What would be like your first main 5 goals or something like this, and how you'd kind of steer your mayoral ship. Is that the word? Mayoral ship? Your mayoral ship. What you would do once you got into office and how you'd steer things once you were in.
Well, I think the thing that I've already started doing, and this has been the most exciting part, is, we have an opportunity with the new administration to put together a world-class leadership team. And when I say that, it's like we can be objective because I'm independent. I don't owe anybody anywhere. I don't owe a party positions. I don't owe anybody a job. I don't owe any of that. So I am going to be looking most creatively at how to bring the best people to each position that can help us to achieve our long-term vision. And I think that is a very exciting and inspiring proposition, to be basically right now during this process, interviewing people that I think are going to contribute. And then I know that as soon as November 5th rolls around and we win this election, that there will be a lot more people that are willing to talk to us that maybe because of parties, parties create fear and loyalty to a party, or, fear that if you don't align yourself in the right way, you're not going to get resources. So like some people have been hesitant to talk to me because they're like, well, I don't want to, piss off the wrong people. And then, maybe my organization's not going to get funded next year.
That's wild.
So, like that stuff is real. That is bullying. Yeah. And that's what happens. But when we liberate people from that and say, hey, we are going to find a world-class team of people. And a lot of those people are right here in Buffalo already. Yeah. But we're going to put together the strongest and best positioned team to help Buffalo move forward. Like that's what I'll tell you. I started this process a year ago, and like I strategically meet with people because I respect the work that they've done, because I appreciate the value they've brought to this community, and because I know that they care and they want to contribute in a meaningful way. And that's our number one priority on day one, is to figure that out. I call it, my first objective is to create a culture of care where people are brought into the team because of their belief in our capacity as a city, because their belief in our potential. So that's the biggest thing.
Everything comes off of culture, Michael. Everything does. Yeah. Like this is something I studied it quite a bit. Yeah. You see Sean McDermott, when he came to the Bills, the first thing he did was change the culture. And a lot of the WGR guys were like, culture doesn't matter. And I strongly disagree with that.
Right. I mean, culture brings, this shared purpose, right? It brings, everybody is functioning in a way to move the whole organism and the whole effort forward. And I think a lot of people think that they, are function in that way. And I think that that's great. I think, but if you haven't experienced that, a really purposeful position where you feel empowered in your responsibilities and in your role, where you feel authentically heard and listened to by other members of your team, where you feel like your values actually make a profound impact on how the team functions and how the team accomplishes its goals. Like it is a really inspiring process to be a part of. And that's my first goal. And then secondly, we're going to figure out how to best invest into systems that allow us to bring neighbors building neighborhoods to life so that, I can come in with a whole plan, of course, but that makes me no different than the last guy or gal. It's like it is partially about my plan or vision, but my plan and vision is really huge. Like it's not specific. It's not nuts and bolts. How we achieve that vision, which is, communities that people are proud to live in, that they feel safe, that they feel connected to, where they feel like they can have an inspiring place for their children to grow up and get educated, and where they're around a community of supportive people. Like that's a big goal. Like that's just basic humanity. Like everybody wants that. They want healthy, safe, playful, educational experiences for their children. Like you're not going to run into anybody in any neighborhood that's going to disagree with that. Never. Right? So like that's a big vision. Yeah. Like I see some neighborhoods that have profound, amazing, inspiring experiences all summer long. You can go to Shakespeare in the Park and hear live music, and there's farmers markets, and you can get a coffee late at night, and there's great restaurants all within walking distance. Yeah. And then there's neighborhoods of profound need where many people don't have cars and can't even get to healthy food. Right. Or have a safe school to go to, or have green space for their kids to play in. So it's like these are the things where we need more parity in our city. And we do that by really empowering neighbors building neighborhoods to guide the process, to guide us. Yes. We have a purposeful team, but we are guided by people that have articulated needs and desires and hopes for their future. And that's
part
what
of the
it's
thing
about.
you're saying. Sorry, it's part of the thing you're saying here is that you can't have a super specific plan until you have all the people in place to talk to your people
Right.
and listen to them, which I think is very wise.
Right.
Because they will have the answers. They will know the answers. There's another thing with culture is that technology follows culture. People think that technology comes and culture changes. That's not the way it works in history. If you look at the end of the 1800s, you had this wild, wild west culture, basically, and the culture changed first. It changed to this culture known as cleanliness is next to godliness. That was literally the name of the culture. And from that culture change, where everyone was so focused on cleanliness, some of the best technological advances in human history came, and that was sewers, running water, refuse, all these things came out of the culture change. And right now, the culture change seems to be, we need to have a power with system. We need to create systems that are power with, and that's a culture change first. It starts with saying, hey, this is going to be our goal. We're going to use the people to help us govern. And it sounds like that is your plan. And with a plan like that, it's something that I can totally get behind. I'm really, really grateful that you came out here today, Michael. I'm really glad.
I appreciate the opportunity very much. I think that this is where we start. Like, when we're thinking about, big transformational changes, bringing people and giving people a seat at the table, giving people a voice, having them be part of and understanding and contributing to the decision-making structure. That's how we start. And we'll leverage all of the best tools at our disposal and all the talent in our city to make these things work. And that's my hope. That's my hope for this next mayoral term and my hope for the next decade or 50 years for the city. It's the hope that we have for our children's future and our grandchildren's future and for the city that we want to be part of. So I really appreciate the opportunity for being here. Thanks, Josh.
Oh, this has been great. Before I let you go here, can you tell everyone where they can find you on social media?
Yeah. So everything is Michael Gainer for Mayor. .com is our website. Michael Gainer for Mayor is our handle on Instagram and TikTok. It's Michael Gainer on Facebook. But, a friend of mine, I sat down and talked to him and he texted me very excitedly. He's like, me and my wife were just sitting in bed and we think that this is the best slogan. Vote for Michael Gainer. It's a no-brainer. And it's a good way to remember my name because we have a Gainer on the ballot and we have a Gardner on the ballot. So do not confuse them. It's remember to vote for Gainer. It's a no-brainer. November 4th.
Like that too?
Yes, indeed. Yep.
GAINER. All right, very cool. Michael, thank you so much for coming out. We wish you luck in the upcoming election, and we hope this reaches some of the younger audience, Gen Z, the people that are looking for some change, something different, people that are sick of group labels, that want to not be labeled and want to have their ideas and the ability to bring their ideas through government into reality, into systems that we all can be proud of.
Right on.
The systems that govern over our lives are one of the most important determining factors for quality of life on this planet. And we need people thinking outside the box like you. So thanks again, Michael.
I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I Love Buffalo podcast. Have a good day.